Hey, this is Warren Redlick. I'm here with Steve Ikeda. Steve is a member of Tesla Owners Club of Japan. We are going to talk about Tesla's performance in Japan, why Tesla hasn't been as successful as we hope, how they might break through and become successful. Tesla is the third largest car market in the world after China and the United States, and yet Tesla sells 500 cars a month in Japan, where Tesla sells maybe 50,000 cars a month in China. Something has to change. I'm excited to talk about it. Steve has a lot of insight as a Tesla Owners Club member. Steve, would you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and how come your English is so good?
Right. Thanks, Warren, for having me. Hi, my name is Steve Ikeda, and I speak English because I grew up in America, as you probably have guessed. I was born in Japan, and then when I was 0 or 7 months old, I went to New York, New Jersey, and then came back to Japan once, and then finished my university in Utah, California.
Okay, and somehow in there you learned Japanese as well.
Yep.
Okay.
Have been actively studying since 5 years old.
Okay, is that like something your parents had you in a school where you would learn Japanese? And how did you end up back in Japan?
Yes. I had to go to a Japanese school from age 5, and then I went back when I was age 8. So I had 3 years of training, and also we spoke Japanese at home, so it was okay to transition to Japan. And then I am stuck in Japan because I am a Japanese citizen. I don't have a visa.
Oh, so you were a student in America, but you didn't have a visa to stay in America. So after your studies were over, you had to go back.
That's correct. It was only a student visa.
And you had to suffer with this healthy food and the relatively inexpensive lifestyle of Japan.
Correct.
Although you're in Tokyo, right?
Yes, I am.
So Tokyo isn't always inexpensive. All right. So you're a Tesla owner. What kind of Tesla do you own or
I
Teslas?
have a 2017 Model S 90D.
Okay. And I'm guessing you got that in 2017 or 2018.
2017 March.
And before we dive into Tesla's business in Japan, can you tell everybody a little bit about the Tesla Owners Club of Japan? You know, how many members, as far as you know, are there? What kind of events do you guys have?
We started out in 2018. I originally found out about the official program through the factory tour, actually. I was trying to get a reservation for the factory tour in Fremont, and then the guys there told me there is this official program. So I got two different large Tesla groups in Japan together and combined that to Tesla Owners Club of Japan. And then now we have about 2,000 members.
You have events like I went to an event with you. Sorry, I went to an event with Ando-san when I was in Tokyo in May, and I went to another event with you here in Nagoya. So,
Mhm.
how often are there events? Where are the events? What are the events like?
We have lots of cars and coffee type of events throughout the month. There are different groups that are hosting those, and then we also have like an annual meetup throughout the whole nation. Then quarterly meetups here and there. For example, next month we're going to have our meetup at the Fuji Speedway race circuit.
You got to email me about that when we're done, so I can make sure it's in my calendar.
Will do.
I think I can make it to that one. So, all right. So let's talk about Tesla, the business in Japan. I think you're the one who told me this, that Tesla sells about 500 cars a month in Japan and it sells 50,000 cars a month in China. What's
Mhm.
your gut level reaction to that? Why is Tesla not selling more cars in Japan?
I think the first thing that comes to my mind is the language barrier. People, I don't have any proof to back this up, but I would say about 20% or less of people speak English here in Japan. So they just don't understand what it is. It takes a few years for them to catch up with the global news.
Okay. So, I mean, the Chinese don't speak English, but Tesla took off in China. And maybe it's because they have a factory there. But, I have a couple of theories myself. I have several theories. The first theory, the thing I hear a lot from people, which I don't think really makes a lot of sense, is that the cars are too large, that the Model 3 and the Model Y are a little bit too large for Japanese consumer tastes or roads or parking lots. Can you comment on that part of it?
Especially in Tokyo area. Elon Musk once said that the Model 3 was built specifically to 1850 millimeters because it's gonna fit into Japanese parking lots, and that is probably the biggest you can fit in regular parking lots in Japan. So Model 3 is the biggest car. So Model S, X, and Y, they're all like too big for Japanese people.
Okay. And then I have seen some Model 3s around and an occasional Model Y, but and I think what people might not understand is when we're talking about the width of the parking spot, like if you put the car in that parking spot, it's almost a little hard to get out of the car if there's another car in the next parking spot. Am I correct?
Yes, you have to use someone to get out.
Right, right. So that's one issue. I mean, and I'll be honest, I walk around and I look at and I don't see a lot of larger parking spots. Almost every parking spot seems small to me. Is that you have the same general impression?
That's correct. In urban areas.
Yeah, and so Cybertruck is going to be really hard to make work in Japan, and they're probably not even going to try, right?
You know what? I did hear this rumor that they are going to try to sell it from like December-ish.
Okay. So maybe,
We'll see.
maybe
We'll see.
because I have an order. Just by the way, I have an order. I have a very early order. It's an
Mhm.
RN112 order, which is the first group of cars that were ordered. I ordered in the first hour. And there's this thing going on right now where people who have an order in the RN112s are the way the order looks in our Tesla account changed. The details are gone. Like I have an RN112 order and I ordered a second one that's RN114, and the RN114, the details are still there. Like the dual motor and the
Right, right.
SD order are still there on the RN114, but they're gone on the RN112. So the theory is that the RN112s are getting close to delivering, that we're going to be in the first group of deliveries, which is not surprising. We have the lowest numbers. So
Mhm.
I was actually wondering if I'll be able to take delivery in Japan. That if it's December, then I might actually have a shot of getting it delivered here. And if I could get it delivered here, I will get it delivered here. I don't know what I'm
Right.
going to do with it. I don't know where I'm going to park it. I'm going to see if I can negotiate with Tesla. I actually live not that far from a Tesla store. So, and
Mhm.
I'm not going to drive it that much, but if I can park it out in front of the Tesla store would probably love that.
Yep.
So, that's an idea. So, some other theories I have about why Tesla struggles to sell in Japan. I think the biggest one, the one that resonates with me the most, and again, I'm not sure why the same thing doesn't apply in China, although with China, they don't really have the same kind of domestic auto manufacturing industry, legacy auto manufacturing, legacy like Toyota, Honda, Mitsubishi, and so on that Japan has. But I feel like Asian countries, their business relationships, their business transactions, relationships are a lot more important. And where in America, people kind of don't really like their car dealers, and car dealers don't have a good reputation societally. I think maybe my guess is that Japanese car dealerships and the salespeople that work in Japanese car dealerships work really hard to build relationships with their customers so that a customer who's thinking about buying a new car has this relationship with a salesperson or with the car dealership and feels sort of naturally like, well, that's where I've got to go to buy my next car. And a lot of times that's a Toyota dealership or other dealerships. Am I am I misunderstanding Japanese culture when I say that?
Uh, you're correct, and part of the reason I believe that's true is because in Japan you have the biannual car inspection. You have to change your oil, your tire pressure, and whatnot. And a lot of people don't understand about cars too much, but the dealerships have this excellent CRM technology where they just call you right in time to say, "Hey, it's time for you to change your belts, time to change your this and that." So people are expecting that, and Tesla Japan doesn't do that.
And maybe Japanese car dealerships treat their customers better and don't rip them off as much as American car dealerships are known for doing.
At least people do not notice that they're being ripped off.
Okay. I mean, so maybe in some cases they do get ripped off, but they're better at hiding it. I mean, because there's probably not a lot of professions in America lower than used car dealer, and a lot of car dealerships in America have a used car dealership side, and then the service side of the car dealership, often their people feel like the service side rips them off when they bring the car in for service. Do people not have that impression in Japan, or are the dealerships generally more highly regarded?
They are highly regarded because they are the ones who take care of your car. They are the ones who always let you know what's happening with the car.
Okay. So that's one thought. And Tesla's model in Japan is also the same as America, the online. There are stores, but the basic way you order a Tesla is online.
Correct. Yeah, we don't have any dealerships per se. It's all the online store or the physical store, brick and mortar, or the online purchase only.
Okay. So I mean that's one theory that maybe to break through in some sense. Well, I mean, I'll ask you that. Do you think Tesla would do better if they created a dealership model and they made an effort to reach out to consumers and modeled themselves in Japan the way they're modeled in and the way that the Japanese car dealerships do it, or is that fundamentally go against the way Tesla works?
Um, and that's a tough question. I would say you do need a little more of those repair type of facilities. You don't need many showrooms, but you do need more of those the mechanical outlets, or what do you call them, the service centers.
Okay. And then another thing, a characteristic of the Japanese car market that a lot of Americans, Brits, Australians, whatever, might not know. Some of them might know this because the other countries are probably more aware of. Americans are kind of blind to the rest of the world. Japan has this segment of the car market that are known as K cars, KEI, not K
Mhm.
car like the Chrysler K car, KEI, KEI meaning light. And there, it's a smaller size car that I believe with the gasoline engines, the maximum engine size is 660 cc's, which is very, very small by American standards. You tend to, like, a lot of them seem to be like of a boxy shape, which maybe like there's a certain length, width, and height restriction, and maybe they make them boxy so they can maximize the volume and the size restrictions. Um,
That's
and
correct.
and the Tesla Model 3 is far bigger, and those are relatively inexpensive cars, and they get a lower tax rate because they fit into this category. They pay less taxes. Obviously, they're
Mhm.
probably more efficient because they have smaller engines. Um, so that's a segment of the market that Tesla is not close to reaching because the cars are so inexpensive and they're so small. Do you have a sense of how, because it seems to me like that's a big chunk of the cars on the road in Japan. Maybe it's more than half.
Yes, especially if you go to the regional areas, you see a lot more K cars. And regarding the cost of ownership, it is much cheaper, but the price of the car itself is quite high. A regular, like a regular K car that is going to be around $15,000 at least. That's like the what you expect for a regular car. And then if you go with all the bells and whistles, then it's going to be anywhere around 30,000.
Okay, so that's actually not that cheap, and actually a Model 3 in America with the tax break could come under that.
Exactly.
And Japan probably doesn't have any tax breaks for electric vehicles, or have they done anything like that?
We do. We do have a generous one, especially if you're in Tokyo and then you classify for what in that. The full amount you receive is, geez, $8,000, 9,000 maybe.
Wow. Okay, so I mean, that's similar. America's 7,500.
Hmm.
That's a pretty healthy incentive. So
That's
then,
federal only, right? And then
okay,
you have states on top of that.
yeah. So looking at um, the future for Tesla, we have a vehicle that's coming maybe next year, almost certainly in 2025, but possibly 2024. What a lot of us refer to as the next generation vehicle. Elon sometimes refers to it as the Robotaxi model. If you read the biography, apparently there's a Robotaxi version that doesn't have a steering wheel and pedals, and another version that does have a steering wheel and pedals. And this vehicle is likely to be smaller. My gut hunch is this vehicle is going to be in the ballpark size of a Toyota Corolla or maybe a RAV4. Um, and that's significantly smaller dimensions than a Model 3. And
Right.
that might have, and presumably less expensive as well. So if Model 3 starts around 35 without tax breaks, this might be a $25,000 car. So, and I actually think it might drop as low as $20,000.
Hmm.
Um, so if they can get the price point down another $10,000 and they can get a tax break like you're describing in Tokyo, and it fits on the roads and parking spots better, do you see that as something that might break through, or is it still going to be facing a lot of challenges in getting consumers to buy it?
You know what? I think as a robo taxi, it's going to work very well. But one other barrier in Japan, I thought, was a lot of people prefer what do you call those minivans or the people movers instead of the sedans or the hatchbacks or whatnot. So, as a robo taxi, if it's not your car, then I'm sure it's going to sell very well. But if you want to own this vehicle, you probably want that boxy shape.
Okay. And actually, I wanted to touch on the robotaxi thing as well. So Uber tried to get into Japan, and there was some kind of resistance. I think it may have to do with the licensing of drivers who are driving as taxis. And so,
Hmm.
for those who don't know, I've used Uber in Tokyo, and I think I've used it in Nagoya. But all it does is summon a taxi. It
Right.
doesn't actually summon an Uber like what we typically think of as an Uber driver. It's just another way of getting a taxi, and then it costs a little more than a regular taxi. And in Japan, you don't normally tip the driver, but with Uber, there's an option to tip them. And the tip is like either 70 cents or $1.40. It's like the options for it's still like way cheaper than a taxi in America. But um, my impression was to some extent Uber may have been resisted because of the political power of taxi owners and taxi drivers. And I'm wondering if that will be an impediment to robo-taxis operating in Japan, or if it's really just as simple as no, there's just this licensing issue, and that licensing issue won't apply to robo-taxis. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, superficially, it is the taxi license thing. You have to have this special license to be able to charge people for driving. And then with Robotaxi, I believe if as long as Tesla Japan holds that license, then they can just release all the Robotaxi in the street and then be okay. But that's just on the surface, It's the Japanese government probably resisting, or any other like taxi organizations resisting this thing. So I'm sure you will encounter the same pressure again.
Yeah, I was talking with a friend of mine the other day. I went and met a friend in Osaka, and we were talking about this. And his impression was that there are parts of Japan where taxis are very easy to get, and there might be resistance, but there are also places where it's hard to find a taxi. So before I moved into Nagoya, I spent a week in Kakegawa, which is I love telling people I went to Kakegawa. Even Japanese people are wondering where Kakegawa is. And for Japanese people, I tell them, oh, it's between Shizuoka and Hamamatsu, and all the Japanese people go, oh, okay, and all the Americans go, I don't know where Shizuoka and Hamamatsu is either. So basically, Kakegawa is a small town between Shizuoka and Hamamatsu, and Shizuoka Prefecture is not too far from Tokyo. So it's on I guess the west side of Tokyo and Yokohama. Am I roughly accurate? And that
That's
geography.
correct.
So
Would
Kakegawa is a
sorry, would it help to say if it's at the foothold of Mount Fuji? Does that work?
yeah, it's not far from Mount Fuji. That's fair. But
All right.
Americans don't know where Mount Fuji is either. So they don't really know where they don't really know where Tokyo, Osaka, and Nagoya is either.
Got it.
So anyway, I'm in Kakegawa, which is a fairly small town. And I don't think there were a lot of taxis when I came out of the main station. Now, Kakegawa is big enough that it has a stop for the bullet train, a local stop for the bullet train, not an express. That's, most of the bullet trains just blow through, but once an hour or twice an hour, a Kodama, which is the local Shinkansen train, bullet train, will stop in Kakegawa. So it's big enough to have that, but it's really fairly small by Japanese standards. And when I was there, I went to the next station over. I can't remember the name of the station. Maybe it was Aino Eki or something like that, to go to Ogasayama Sports Park or whatever for this event I was going to. And I got off the train, and there were no taxis on either side of the station. That station is small enough that there's like literally there's like a phone number down there that you can call to get a taxi, and I think it might take a while. So in a place like that, it's like there is sort of a growing labor shortage in Japan. In a place like that, robo-taxis might actually be welcomed, especially if they're inexpensive. So for the people in a place like Kakegawa, they may find it difficult to find a taxi. The taxis are still relatively expensive. And if you're able to offer them an option that's inexpensive, that might actually fly better in those areas. What do you think of that?
I think that's one of the best solutions you can offer. And then there's this funny story that just came out about a week ago in Japan, where Uber and Lyft, maybe not Lyft, but Uber in Japan was trying to get the regulations around taxiing relaxed. So instead, what the Japanese government did was they raised the taxi driver license. I mean, you can now be up to age 80 to be a taxi driver. It used to be like 75 or 70, but instead of relaxing the regulations, they did something totally opposite to what Uber was asking for.
Right. Yeah, and then that is true that a lot of the taxi drivers like if you're in America, a lot of the taxi drivers are foreigners, and it seems like what's that? They're young foreigners, and in Japan, it seems like a lot of the taxi drivers are old men.
They are.
It just seems like it's a very common thing. But so if Japan does allow robo-taxi and Tesla is able to actually deliver a functioning robo-taxi, that actually could be a game changer that helps the Japanese economy. And, Japan has an aging population. A lot of the elderly don't have really good ways of getting around. And if all of a sudden they could take an inexpensive robo-taxi to get from point A to point B, it might actually make life a lot better for a lot of elderly people in Japan.
Yes.
And also could, help. I mean, actually, it's funny. People say the Japanese economy is stagnant. I'm sorry, going off on a tangent here, but I keep reading stories about how difficult the Japanese economy is, and I feel like everywhere I go, unless you're in a place like Kakagawa, but if you're in Tokyo, if you're in Nagoya, if you're in Osaka, if you're in like major cities, it seems like the economy is really thriving. I feel like there's a lot of activity everywhere. There's a lot of places that are open. Am I missing something? Where's the flagging economy? Because it seems to me like the economy is doing really well here. Am I seeing something wrong?
I would say the exchange rate is getting unfavorable.
Is getting
But
what?
if you're looking, exchange rate is getting unfavorable to us. So as long as you're in Japan, just doing business in Japan, it looks normal. But once you know what's happening outside, then yeah, everything is more expensive than what it was before.
Well, it's expensive for the Japanese to buy supplies for their
Hmm.
manufacturing, but
Hmm.
that would mean when they sell products overseas, they actually get a better return. The
Right.
dollars come back to Japan more valuable. So that kind of cuts both ways, doesn't it?
So only some exporting companies are making money, which is part of that is big auto like Toyota.
Yeah. Well, and I'm in Nagoya. Nagoya,
Right.
Nagoya being essentially the home of Toyota. Toyota City is on the east edge of Nagoya. So,
Hmm.
all right. So anyway, I think there's potential for Robotaxi if you are able to lower the cost of transportation and increase the convenience of transportation. In some ways, that juices an economy. Also, if you go to EVs and Japan is able to generate electricity in ways other than using fossil fuels, which are coming from other countries and get more expensive, if they can increase solar, which I see a lot of solar farms around Japan. Maybe I'm misreading things, but I think Japan has been deploying a fair amount of solar. And no the nuclear's kind of gone away, right?
Yeah, we do have few online still, but yeah, many of them are offline now.
Yeah. So if they can shift to EVs and find a good way of generating electricity for them that doesn't involve fossil fuels, that might help dealing with the exchange rate. Uh,
Hmm.
I think in a way that robotaxi could really help the Japanese economy. Do you see where that might come into play? I mean, it'll hurt the taxi drivers, right? But it's getting harder and harder to find taxi drivers, right?
Right.
So do you think that's potentially a boost to the? I mean, you already own your own Tesla, but could you see situations where you might be traveling by train instead of by your car, and you decide to hop in a robotaxi, or do you pretty much take your car everywhere?
I take my car everywhere, but going back to that robotaxi in rural areas, I think it's really going to boost the economy. Not just because the elderly are going to be they're going to have better mobility. It's because they have better mobility, they're going to get out of their houses. They're going to go spend more money, and then it's going to be you're going to have a better quality of life that way. So, you know, if we have robo taxis coming into this country, then part of that, the revenue is going to go to America, to Tesla. So we're going to lose that money if you look at the country as a whole. But still, I think you can get some of that cash that's stashed away in those old people's houses to come out into the economy, and then it will be much better.
Well, you just fed me right into the next place I wanted to go. I've been talking for years about a gigafactory in Japan.
Hmm.
And given that Panasonic is a major supplier of batteries to Tesla, and they were reportedly building a 4680 factory in Wakayama outside of Osaka, it
Hmm.
seems like if Tesla is able to make Japan work as if Japanese people do look like they're going to buy the smaller vehicle that they're about to build, then it might make sense, given the size of the Japanese market, to build a Tesla factory here. What do you think
Hmm.
about the prospects for that?
I think it's there's a high possibility because we do have a lot of automotive factories that are underutilized or not even they're abandoned. Some of them are not even used. So just like Fremont factory, Tesla can buy those again, refurbish it, and make it a gigafactory again, and then also recruit a lot of Japanese talent and have them work in Japan because they don't want to work outside. They don't want to use English. In gigafactory, if they can use Japanese as official language, it's going to work well.
Yeah, just one thing to be clear, if they build a gigafactory, it's going to be a new factory. Tesla
Oh,
has
okay.
demonstrated they don't like using an old factory. They did that in Fremont. It did not go well, and pretty much all new Tesla factories are new buildings. Um, I suppose they could bend, but I don't think they would. And I will say that one of the things I've really been impressed with in Japan, I lived here 30 years ago. I traveled briefly in May, but having lived here now for about a month, I'm really impressed by the work ethic.
Hmm.
I knew it before, sort of intellectually, but I actually seeing it on a day to day. going through life in Japan, Japanese workers work hard. Japanese customer service is so much better than American customer service. It's like it's stunning how it doesn't matter how cheap the place is. Like in America, if you go to Walmart, customer service is terrible. But I go to
Hmm.
Don Quixote, right, which is a similar to Walmart really in terms of what it is. I have
Right.
a Mega Donkey, which is like a super Walmart, right?
Hmm.
4 minute walk from me, and they still have great customer service. If you ask for something, they're very friendly, they're very polite, they'll walk you to whatever you're looking for. They'll make an effort to help you. And almost everything I do in Japan, like the customer service is top notch. And that's, to me, that's a reflection of the cultural values in Japan, that we work hard, and the customer, we used to say this in America, the customer is number one. Like I don't think that's really true anymore in America. It's just like the car
Hmm.
dealerships have a good relationship with the customer, and they really do provide better service. I think generally speaking, the workers are more motivated to work hard and get things done. I'm not saying they're perfect. I'm not saying there aren't inefficiencies in the system, but I think a Tesla factory in Japan might be as productive as a Tesla factory in China. That's like one of the things that stands out. Giga Shanghai is highly productive compared to Fremont. And
Hmm.
we don't know yet about Berlin and Texas because they haven't fully ramped, but Shanghai really kicks butt. I wonder if Japanese workers would actually be motivated to say, we got to do better than China. You know,
Oh yeah.
it's almost like a rivalry. Hey, we can't let the Chinese outdo us on this factory. We got to kick their butts. I could
Hmm.
almost see that kind of attitude like flying in Japan.
Yep.
And then also a Japanese gigafactory would be making steering wheels on the the right hand side,
Of the
right?
vehicle.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And they can do that in China, of course, but you could see where they might just say, okay, Japan will be the factory where we make the right hand drive vehicles and ship those to to Australia, for example, and other countries that drive on the left hand side of the road. So I think there's a bunch of advantages to Giga Japan. A lot of people say, oh, it should be in Korea, oh, it should be in Australia, India, whatever. Um, do you think it's viable? Like, let's say, I don't know how many you could make. I think if Giga Japan made 500,000 vehicles a year, I think the Japanese car market might be able to absorb all of that if we can get Japanese car buyers over the hump and interested in buying Teslas. Um,
Hmm.
and maybe even conceive, because the Japanese car market's pretty large, and especially if it goes into like robotaxi phase, then it could produce a lot of robotaxis for the Japanese car market as well. Um, am I getting over the top here, or is it still? Do you think there's a chance?
I think I want to split that into three different answers. One is about the factory line workers, the actual workers on the shop floor. Those people, like you just mentioned, they are really diligent. They know what they're doing, and then they have this very long history of making cars in Japan. So they're really good at creating things at high quality, and we have a system for that already. And then number two is the engineering level. We again we have a very long history of homologating for all different markets. So compared to Korea, of course, they have Hyundai and other companies, but we have major autos doing that for so many decades. And it's going to be really easy for us to create right-hand drive cars that are going to go to UK or to Australia, any other countries. And last one is the management level. I would say Japanese people shouldn't do this. It should be somebody from America or maybe China as well. I don't think Japanese people are really cut out for managing international companies. So somebody else can take over that role. And then what's going to happen with that combination is we're going to have a factory in Japan producing made in Japan Tesla cars, which is going to overcome that the national pride. So, if, for example, with American cop cars, they're always using like Fords or the GM. They don't use Japanese cars for police vehicles, right? And that's probably part of the national security things, as well as same thing. We don't want to use Tesla cars. We want to use Toyotas for our taxis. But if it's a made in Japan Tesla, then I think we can kind of get over that problem.
Do you think that the existing car manufacturers like Toyota would resist um, Tesla being allowed to build a factory in Japan? And do you think they have the political power to do anything about it?
I don't think so. They may be able to resist with the robotaxi regulations until they catch up, which I'm not sure if they're ever going to. But
And of course, Tesla could license Robotaxi hardware and software to Japanese
Mhm.
car makers, and that would give them a chance as well. And
Right.
I think you probably saw that Toyota is adopting gigacastings.
Mhm.
They're starting to look at manufacturing vehicles the way Tesla's manufacturing with front and rear castings, and that's a step for Toyota to try to get. I mean, I see it like it seems to me like because I went to this Japanese competition of university students building electric vehicles and gas vehicles and these little race cars basically and driving around, and I was really impressed with the commitment of these students teams to and their ability to actually deliver pretty effective vehicle
Mhm.
in a year. They put it together in a year while they're students, they're full-time students, and somehow they find the time to do this. So I think that there's a really strong education system in Japan, a really strong commitment to engineering. Americans, it's hard to get Americans to study STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, math, whatever. I don't think it's as hard to get Japanese students to study those fields. Am I right?
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess another topic is I've seen a lot of solar in Japan. Um, do you know much about the market for things like Powerwall and Megapack in Japan? Are you seeing any of that deployed here? Whether
Yeah.
it's whether it's Tesla or others.
Stationary storage, we don't have many, but the solars are everywhere because of this government incentive. Everybody just went into solar because they could make money.
Yeah. And is that still true? Is the solar incentive still there?
Still here.
Yeah. Okay. So it seems like once you're deploying solar, if we can get the price of megapacks or power walls down, then that
Mhm.
might be viable. I don't know, would Japanese consumers want to have a power wall in their home? It seems like because of the size of Japanese homes and their energy efficiency, just one power wall would be able to be a good backup, but maybe Japanese electrical grid is so strong it doesn't go down very much. I haven't seen a power outage yet.
These days it doesn't really happen.
Yeah.
But still, we would like to have it because if you have an EV at home, and then in Japan, your electricity contract is usually up to 60 amperes, which is very low when you have an EV at home. So I do sometimes go over the limit, and then my whole house just blacks out. But in those cases, we do want to have the power walls.
Right. Well, Powerwall, and then if you had Powerwall and solar, do you know off the top of your head what does it cost per kilowatt hour for electricity in Japan?
1 cent.
20 cents? Okay. Yeah, so in America, like I was paying 15 cents in America, but gasoline is much more expensive in Japan than it is in America, so that makes it even more of an advantage in Japan.
Hold on, is gasoline more expensive in Japan now?
I'm pretty sure gasoline in Japan is more expensive than America because gasoline in America is cheap.
What are we talking? $6 a gallon?
Let's see. I think that
$6 a gallon. No, I think we're really close, or maybe America's even more expensive in some places, isn't it?
California is expensive. Yeah.
Right.
Maybe it's not as bad as it was before. Maybe Japan has gotten. It used to be that gas was much more expensive in Japan. Maybe that's when
Mhm.
the yen was stronger against the dollar.
Mhm.
Okay, so it would seem like it would make sense if you were a Japanese EV owner that if you had your own home, you would want solar on your roof and
Mhm.
then a power wall, and then you'd be able to charge your vehicle more effectively and back up your home.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so um, are you paying attention to Tesla Bot?
Uh huh.
Do you think that has potential in Japan? Because that one, there's no existing competition really.
Yeah, it comes down to how cheap the labor is in this country.
Yeah, it's true. Labor is inexpensive here, but
Hmm.
I'm sort of thinking that there are areas, there's a labor shortage in Japan. And
Hmm.
the idea is that, and actually one of the things I've noticed, and you've probably noticed this too, is it seems like compared to when I was here 30 years ago, there's a lot of people working in, let's say, the stores, um, who are, or whether it's Lawson Station, 7-Eleven, or supermarkets or whatever. I feel like I'm seeing a lot of foreigners working in Japanese stores. And I
Yep.
think I don't want to say that Japan has a little bit of racism in it, but if they were able to have bots do some of that work, they would have to have less immigrants, less foreigners come into the country, and some Japanese might prefer that.
Mhm.
Is that crazy?
That's well. I mean, to be fair, those foreigners working at the convenience stores, they are mostly students, so they have to pay their tuition as well. So we can't take their tuitions like sourced away.
Okay. Yeah, I just feel like there's, like let's say caring for the elderly.
Hmm.
It seems like
Yeah, that's
Tesla bot could be very helpful for caring for the elderly. And
hmm
it's hard to find labor to do that work.
correct.
And there's a lot of elderly. Same thing with the Robotaxi. There's a lot of elderly people who are sort of stuck in their homes. And if you had bots, a good use case for bots is just walking around and checking on people. And you know, to some extent, if you use large language models, they may actually be able to have a conversation with people.
A
And
decent one.
what's that?
A decent one.
Yeah, yeah, and that that might be something that would provide comfort, some sense of connectivity. And then if they see
Hmm.
that somebody's in distress, they'd be able to get them help faster.
I think robots can be really helpful with the logistics, with the package deliveries. They
Yeah.
don't really have to fit inside the truck. They can be just magnetically attached to the car and then pop off and then deliver things, come back. That's the first step, probably.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I definitely think there's a lot of. I think that Japanese businesses would find a way to use
Hmm.
bots to be more effective.
Oh
And there's
yeah.
just you want to look for work that's what Tesla refers to as dangerous, repetitive, and boring, and
Hmm.
find that kind of work that even like in America, there's a lot of people who just don't want to do that kind of work. Japanese will gaman suru and they'll do what they have to do. But if you were able to have a bot do that kind of work, it would free people up to do more value added work, at least in
Do
the
you think
short run.
the Optimus can do agriculture as well?
Yeah, yeah, I think there's a lot of potential in a lot of fields.
All
Um,
right.
all right. Anything else that you have on mind about Tesla and the future of Tesla in Japan? And anything you have hopes and dreams about?
Tesla HVAC. We're a hot and humid country. We're looking forward to what kind of aircon they're making.
Yeah, yeah. I've been struck by it seems like Japan doesn't use air conditioning as much as Florida does. Like we have roughly similar climates, but everywhere I go in Florida, you step inside a building and it's like you get hit by a blast of cold air. And it seems like a lot of places in Japan I go, like they're not using air conditioning nearly as much as Florida does. And maybe
Same.
that's just energy efficiency, but I sweat a lot more here.
That's true.
So HVAC, I think that's coming. I think that's still a couple years away, but I do think
Hmm.
that's coming. Okay. All right. Um, I'm just trying to think if there's any other reasons why. Oh, I think the other thing that might help with Tesla getting a factory in Japan is if those of us who are big Tesla bulls are correct that Tesla's going to really start cutting into Toyota's market share and other OEMs' market share in other countries around the world, then Toyota's going to start suffering from an inability to sell vehicles. And they're going to want to cling on to their home market, but you know, a lot of us think we're going to be pushing the OEMs towards bankruptcy at some point.
Hmm.
And letting Tesla build a factory in Japan could be seen as like the death blow for Toyota and the other domestic automakers. But at the same time, if they're going down anyway, wouldn't you want to like create jobs, here in Japan? Do you I don't know, have because Ford and GM never built factories in Japan, right? I mean, Ford at one point had bought Mazda, but I don't think they ever built factories here, did they?
No.
I mean, Coca-Cola and McDonald's took a strong foothold after maybe it was before World War II, but certainly after World War II. But it
Hmm.
seems like you don't see newer development of, I mean, Apple's does pretty well in Japan, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So you got to figure out, I think almost in a sense, Tesla needs to take a look at how did Apple do so well in Japan? And probably the deep dark secret is Apple probably did a lot of advertising, which is something
Yeah.
Tesla
Hmm.
doesn't like to advertise.
Hmm.
So, okay.
That,
Do you think
yeah.
that
Yeah.
Tesla needs to advertise here?
Yes.
Hmm. and they don't, right?
Maybe not in the traditional way, not like TV commercials or anything, but they should have some sort of a targeted audio advertising system.
Okay. Because I don't think they need it in America, but I think given the poor results in Japan so far, there might be a strong case for it. Although to be fair, I don't really see a lot of foreign vehicles in Japan anyway. I do occasionally see a BMW or Mercedes. They don't usually look new. Do you feel like are there particular car brands outside of Japan that do well here, like maybe Porsche?
Yeah. If you're in Tokyo, you see a lot more German companies, and and any other myriads of things. But in Nagoya, especially where you're living, you see a lot of Toyotas.
Yeah. Well, because this is the home of Toyota, so you're going to see more Toyotas here. I
Sure.
get it.
Yeah. In Tokyo, you see a lot more Mercs and BMWs, whatever.
Okay. All right. Well, I can't think of anything else to talk about, so I want to thank you very much for having this conversation with me. And anything else you want to add?
What about this is not Tesla related, but SpaceX. Do you think it's good to have a SpaceX base here?
So I don't I don't think Japan is very close to the equator, and you typically want to launch closer to the equator if you're launching objects something into orbit. Um,
Hmm.
maybe down near Okinawa would make more sense because that's a little further south. Um,
Hmm.
the other thought that I've had for a long time is if SpaceX is going to succeed in developing Starship to the point where Starship is doing transoceanic trips like Los
Hmm.
Angeles to Asia or something like that. Tokyo's a big city. Osaka's a big city. It would seem like they'd want a landing pad that can serve Japanese cities. Now, one of my theories is that there would be a landing pad that would be capable of serving multiple cities at once and then have a hyperloop. Then the landing pad can't be near population, right? So that might have to be on an island off the coast that is unpopulated. And
Right.
then maybe you have tunnels like hyperloop tunnels connecting that landing pad to Tokyo and Osaka and Nagoya and so on. Um,
Hmm.
I do think that would be, and given that I flew here and it's a really long flight to get from America to Japan. I mean, from New York it's 13 hours. I'm guessing from Los Angeles it's probably like 10 hours. I don't even know,
Yep.
Dino. So
And,
if you're going to turn 10 hours into 30 minutes,
mhm.
yeah, I think that might be a hit. And if you then ran a hyperloop that took people to the main station, a main station in Tokyo and the main station in Osaka and so on,
Right.
that that would, a lot of people would ride that. And I think Japanese people would probably be more likely to say, "Oh yeah, we're doing that." It's a little bit of a roller coaster ride. There's the weightlessness moment and there's, the high G forces, but if it's roughly comparable pricing and you get there in 30 minutes instead of 10 hours, I think that's going to sway a lot of people.
Hmm. Yeah.
So or you could even I don't know where the island would be. That'd be an interesting question. Where would you locate the island? That would be, or what would the location be? Maybe it could be on land. Maybe like near Mount Fuji, I guess. I mean, there is a lot of land in Japan that is not developed because something like 80% of Japan is mountainous. So
Hmm.
if you were able to make a landing spot that was 20 miles from the nearest city, then maybe that would be good enough. And then that would be easier to connect to large cities. So I
Hmm.
don't know. If honestly, if it got close enough to a bullet train stop that was somewhere between Tokyo and Osaka, well, then you'd be, a 90-minute ride from either one of them once you landed. So that would
Yep.
make a lot of sense. So I'd have to think about where you would put it in Japan, whether you'd put it on an island offshore, or you'd put it somewhere on land. Maybe there's a spot that I haven't thought of. So
Hmm.
I would love to
To do
see that.
I guess you have to go talk to some of the government officials high up there somewhere, and it seems that they just don't understand. Like last time Elon Musk was here in Japan for Grimes' performance about a month ago, and then the minister himself didn't even care to see Elon Musk. I mean, like if he was there, you could just say, like, come over for 5, 10 minutes to like talk, and then he didn't do that. So same thing with other big corporates. They could just casually say, "Hey Tesla, you want to have this talk about the SpaceX station somewhere like in Mount Fuji?" And uh, I think that's the first thing they should do to have more conversation. And the biggest thing is about the language barrier. We're always information starved. We're information poor. So
Yeah.
um, the first thing is to get the word out here. To do that, advertisement is necessary in some sort of form. People have to understand what Tesla is, what they're doing.
Yeah, as far as SpaceX goes and Starship, I think Starship taking passengers from, let's say, the West Coast of the United States to Asia is probably at least 5 years away from actually
Hmm.
commercial. It may be that they're going to do packages quicker than that. I know that I saw one of the SpaceX board members on the All In podcast, Antonio Garcia Gracias or something like that. He was talking about using it for high speed cargo delivery. That's going to be a killer app for Starship. Um,
Hmm.
I was a little surprised. I kind of have a gut hunch that Elon did meet with people when he was here in Japan, and it just didn't get a lot. They just didn't want it to get any press. It's,
Maybe,
it seems unlikely he would have flown here just to see Grimes in concert when he can see Grimes in concert in lots of places. I know he went to Team Lab, Project Team Lab in Tokyo as well, but
mhm.
I think he was here for 3 or 4 days, and that other stuff took him like 6 hours. So the odds are he
um,
had something else to do when he was here.
Honda joined the NACS coalition, so maybe.
Yeah, no, but like he doesn't need to meet with Panasonic because they already have a well-established relationship with Panasonic.
Mhm.
So I just have this gut hunch that he did meet with people in Japan. And I should mention, in the past, one of my reasons for thinking that Tesla was going to build a gigafactory in Japan was Tesla had Hiromichi Mizuno on the board of directors, and he seemed like a guy who carried a lot of weight in Japan. He was the head of the largest pension fund in Japan. He seemed like he had a lot of connections. And then he was on the board for, I think, 4 years and then left the board and nothing really happened with Japan. And I'm wondering, well, why was he on the board? Did
Um,
did he fail?
no, I met him in this June, and then he said he achieved his personal goals at Tesla, so that's why he's left.
Yeah. But what were his personal goals, I guess is the question. What was he hoping to achieve?
I didn't get a clear answer on that, but it was about pushing Japan towards sustainable economy. And then now he's moving on to, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to tell this, but he he went to Africa somewhere to find out his new quest, and he's still working on environmental issues. So I think that was part of his goal at Tesla.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm just, given that Japan is the third largest car market in the world, and India is rising, Japan is flatlining a little bit, but
Hmm.
Japan is still a very large and very important car market. And even if the India market's rising, the share of that market that's vehicles that are Tesla value, $20,000 or more, is really, really small because India is much, much poorer than Japan. The GDP per capita in India is like $3,000 a year, where Japan it's like $50,000 a year. So Japan is a much, much wealthier country. So there's a lot more people here who can afford to buy a Tesla. Even
Hmm.
though India has 10 times the population of people who can afford a Tesla is actually larger in Japan than it is in India. So if that it's actually maybe 11 or 12 times the population. All right. Well, I think we've covered everything.
Hmm.
I think we can wrap this up, but I want to thank you so much for doing this. And for the audience, I'm hoping to have conversations like this with more people in Japan in the future to sort of address these questions of what's it going to take for Tesla to take off in Japan and see if we can get some other perspectives. So, Steve, thank you so much for doing this, and we'll talk again soon.
Yep. Thank you, Warren.